Hey guys, just a heads up if I sound a bit off, I've had a cold for the past few days and it's been hard on my throat. That being said, with the new apocalyptic shadow rotation last week comes the return of two familiar bosses, Aventurine and Bananas. In this video, I'll be going over Aventurine from his counters to how exactly the fight works. Feel free to check the description for access to the whole slideshow, as well as the running Google Sheets documenting my recorded clears for both sides. Aventurine is actually one of Hunt's best matchups. The best way to kill him and his dice is with fast frequent single target attacks. As such, Feixiao is the absolute queen of this mode, with Aglaea next up due to her pseudo-Hunt status and favorable AS buffs. Boothill is also a bit behind both of these two, but is still enough of a solid choice between his ability to not just one-shot the dice, but shred Aventurine's toughness as well. That being said, Seele can also match up quite well despite being off element. Most of Aventurine's toughness can be depleted by killing the dice, which are quite squishy and only have 20 res. Seele overcomes this with their 20% res pen and resurgence, and can run Sustainless much easier due to the heal on break, letting her speedrun breaking Aventurine with any external assistance before survival becomes an issue. After Hunt, destruction units like Jingliu and Blade have the next best matchup, especially since both of them naturally favor action advancers like Sunday and Bronya to double their turns. The full heal on break benefits both of their playstyles, mitigating Jingliu's HP drain while giving Blade more HP to drain, and letting them also run Sustainless where they normally would struggle. The high frequency nature of this fight also lets Jingliu Blade pair shine once again, though this means that Blade will be replacing the sustain. Yunli gets 15% res pen from AS, and her AoE taunt plus damage reduction lets her Sustainless much easier, meaning you may actually prefer using her to clear. In a similar but more awkward vein to Yunli, the AS buffs not only give Ratio 15% res pen, but universal toughness reduction on his follow-ups. While his 5 toughness follow-ups means that he still wants external existence, the fact that he prefers debuffers anyways means that spawning in someone like Pela works a-okay. The constantly spawning dice means that close to permanent debuffs, like Pela's, Jiaoqiu's, or Tribbie's, work best here. Topaz can technically achieve the same job, but is subject to Numby RNG or SP consumption to compensate. If you can handle the initial rotation, the SP refund on break should alleviate the issue, but I will note that I haven't seen Topaz successfully clear outside of Feixiao teams. Due to the high frequency, low HP nature of this fight, sub DPS are also worth considering as well. March Hunt naturally stands out due to her high toughness shred paired with the ability to match her Shifu's element. Otherwise, frequent attackers like Argenti, Mini Herta, and Jade can perform exceptionally well for the Herta teams, with Argenti having extra synergy with Boothill teams and Herta on Feixiao teams. Notably though, Argenti can be played as main DPS too, so if you're out of options, he can be a great hyper carry. Nukers are placed lower here, not necessarily because they can't clear fast, but because of the opportunity cost incurred by not using them versus Bananas instead. This is less of an issue if you have multiple AoE options, but if you only have one strong AoE option, you should be using it versus Bananas. The Herta suffers most from this opportunity cost conundrum, followed by Acheron. Jingyun still has a pretty good matchup, especially when paired with Sunday, who he should be with 100% of the time anyways. The DOT core of Kafka, Black Swan, and Ron Mei can actually clear Aventurine quite consistently, if a bit slower. Keep in mind that this requires a sustainless team or Eidolons for extra power, since dice do not take turns and thus 0 DOT damage outside of Kafka's triggers. Interestingly, their average score doesn't change all too much with Acheron, the other Mei. Firefly and DHIL do have a passable matchup versus this side compared to Bananas, but Aventurine restricting these characters to killing dice one by one hampers their performance outside of sustainless teams. The team-wide energy drain makes starting up with HMCs and Tingyun's ult slower for instance, and can mess with skill into ult timings into phase 2. If they are at E2, they can brute force, but given Aventurine's 40% res, you'll likely have better options. In terms of budget options, 4-star only clears have been achieved with all the 4-star DPS on this list, though their clears are highly technical and require sustainless teams. Conversely, if you do have Eidolons on your supports, you can go with that route as well. Clara and Yanqing are more here if you don't have any good options, as Clara's counters can struggle to kill dice fast enough, while Yanqing can't reliably maintain soul-still sync between events AoE and bounce attacks. E1 Robin highly recommended for both. And of course, this should be no surprise, but with the name of the game being fast, frequent, single target, what other support comes to mind but Robin? Sure, the energy drain hurts her a bit, but provided you can offset the -10 every phase, she brings by far the most impact to the team. And speaking of ways to offset her ult uptime, both RMC and Tingyun can help assist her with that, while Sunday, Ron Mei, and, well, RMC again, all help reduce Aventurine's toughness faster through different means of secondary supports. Pela's toughness damage and defense shred make her a solid budget pick for most teams as well. Lower dice HP make a lack of true 100% uptime on her ult less noticeable, though it is a demerit nonetheless. Funny enough, you can run her as DPS, especially with a signature like Silver Wolf's or Acheron's, and she only falls about a cycle or less behind Jingliu from my personal testing. Since Sustainless is quite popular, this also gives Bronya a chance to shine. Her utility in advancing Robin, as well as her speed boost at E2, should you happen to have it, gives her a niche over Sunday in faster clearing teams. The E4 follow-up Toughness Shred is also a nice bonus. The SP refund on break also helps offset her SP hungry playstyle, though having her E1 still definitely helps. Sparkle once again suffers from 50% action advance syndrome, making her less effective against a high hit count fight, but her raw numbers still carry her somewhat. Hanya mainly sees use in 4-star clears, and Silver Wolf mainly in Seele teams, to break Aventurine's remaining toughness and provide much needed res pen implants. Tribbie, Jiaoqiu, and Asta are exceptional, good, and niche to 4-star clear supports respectively, but their matchups are so much better versus bananas that you are better using them there 99% of the time. Fugue and HMC are pretty much just for Boothill and for those who have no choice but to run Firefly, though HMC is optional on Boothill teams. And finally, well, if you see Yukong get Apocalyptic Shadow, let me know because I'd like to see her too. For sustains, it's honestly quite straightforward. The best sustain is none at all. The heal buff on break combined with Aventurine's sporadic attacks and lack of meaningful CC makes it easier for the average player to run sustainless as well. If you really want to sustain though, Aventurine has the best sub DPS capabilities, followed by Gallagher and Huohuo for the energy they provide to the team. While Fushuan and Luka can be slight downgrades, it's not enough to warrant a tier shift in my opinion, especially since they still have their ever small mono quantum and counter key niches. Lingsha is such a free matchup versus bananas that unless you're running sustainless on that side, bring her there instead. But solid sustains have some mix of either good sustain or good utility, and then there's Natasha who is a bit worse but honestly isn't even that far behind. This is probably the first time I'm going to say this, but run sustainless as your default, then if that isn't comfortable, just use whoever you feel most comfortable with. Okay, on to the boss himself. Aventurine, known here as the Daring Dice Roller, is physical, ice, lightning, and wind weak, with 40% res versus other elements, and has 30% more HP compared to his last rotation, at 2.5 million now per phase. This isn't really that big of a deal once you get down to the mechanics of this stage though. He has 158.4 speed and 190 toughness, same as before, as well as 75% CC res and 40 F res. Not worth trying to CC him. His summons share the same weaknesses as he does, with only 20% res versus other elements, and are much squissier at 30 toughness and base 68.4 KHP. From my observations, the number on top equals how much more percentage HP they have, with a 7 die having 7% more HP than base, etc. As mentioned twice before, fast frequent single target is king, and you'll see why in a bit. In battle, you'll want to aim for whatever open dice you can until you beat Aventurine's score, and unlock his toughness so you can get to targeting and breaking him right away. Despite all these different options on who to potentially focus, the fight is generally much more straightforward, with 4-star and sustain clears mainly needing to worry about focusing charged dice, and Seele clears mainly worrying about focusing dice. It's usually best to just focus Aventurine directly once his toughness is unlocked. Killing higher score dice helps your damage snowball more, but killing lower score dice is easier, so keep that a bit in mind. Another thing is that if you're in the section of slower clears, where focusing charged dice is needed, you can technically spread your dice damage across 2 turns instead, if you start damaging them before Aventurine charges them on turn 2. Compared to other Apocalyptic Shadow buffs, the overall buff is much more important this time in my opinion. A free heal on break makes sustainless runs much easier overall, but the lack of team-wide advance and ult refresh can be detrimental for certain setups. Basic and skill vault is also baked into the general buff instead of for the selectable ones this time, which is nice for DPS that rely on those. As for the selectable buffs, the first buff is obviously meant for Aglaea, though Seele can actually abuse this too, potentially infinite looping with cheesy setups like Eagle plus ERR rope. Basic spammers like Blade and Dilk also like the damage boost. Daring Wager is a good general buff, everyone likes more speed and less damage, and Turn of Luck helps follow-up attackers hit harder, especially off-element follow-ups like Feixiao and characters who don't care about speed like Yunli. Okay, so how do we break Event? Well, for starters, Event starts off Toughness Lock after you use your techniques and takes basically no damage until you exceed his score for each phase. This means exceeding 49 points in phase 1 and 99 points in phase 2. You start with 8 and 9 points for each respective phase, and gain more points by continually killing dice lower than your point total, adding their point values to yours. Fun fact, Your point total also adds that much percentage points of vulnerability to the enemy. So at the phase 1 breakpoint of 50, for example, you'll have an extra 50% vuln. You can pause to check the exact spawn order if that helps, but basically for phase 1, you want to kill 4 dice in this order: 7, then 12 or 5, then the other, then 18. You can technically kill 12 and 5 together for a slightly faster run, but Aglaea is the only DPS capable of this at a reasonable investment. This will leave Aventurine with 110 toughness, or 70 toughness if you also kill the remaining 2 dice afterwards. Phase 2 is very similar to Phase 1, requiring a minimum of 5 dice killed instead of 4. The safe option is 5, 10, 8, 30, or 22 depending on your damage, then times 2. However, if you can achieve this rotation before Aventurine gets 2 more turns, go for 5, 10, times 2, 30 or 22, then the other for exact lethal with faster ramp-up time. Both of these rotations will leave Aventurine with 90 toughness and 6 dice remaining, meaning that you can actually break Aventurine this time just by killing his dice. While this is a niche and mostly impractical tech, there is a funny interaction where E0 Aglaea outputs so much damage with Sunday and E1 Tribbie that by aiming twice at the left dice, she can 2-shot the 75 dice with E1 Tribbie's true damage procs, since the 24% true damage collected from killing the left die doesn't suffer from the 95% damage reduction. This lets her take 2 turns to kill 3 dice and unlock Aventurine's toughness way earlier, instead of the usual 5 turns for 5 dice. This is theoretically also possible for blast DPS like Jingliu and DHIL, though again, I'd question if the overall team is more optimal. Shout out to Narwhalsy for exploiting this interaction. Finally, his attacks follow a relatively simple pattern. He opens each phase with an uninterruptible AoE attack that also drains 10 energy, so no 0 AV Tingyun ults allowed, followed by summoning 2 dice. His next attack is a single target hit, followed by 5 bounces. After that, he does another AoE drain, and charges all dice on the field and locks onto a target. If both dice are killed before his next turn, that target gets their full ult and eventually repeats attacking from a single target hit turn. Otherwise, he hits that target with a single target that has a small chance to imprison, followed by another random single target attack. In both cases, it's another turn until his next charge, but at that point, the fight is taking way too long for a 3-star clear. His second phase is much like his first. He just summons 4 dice instead of 2, his turn 1 bounce deals 8 hits instead of 5, his turn 2 drain also removes 4 points, which doesn't do anything unless you're going the risky route by killing the times 2 dice early. And well, his turn 3 action becomes AoE. The nuke either hits everyone and is followed up by a bounce, or fails to go off and refunds everyone's ult instead. Very straightforward. Honestly, it's nice to see a true single target tailored endgame fight in this AoE laden meta. Sure, strong enough AoE can brute force this, but the same can be said for strong single target versus AoE content, and it's generally inefficient to brute force in Apocalyptic Shadow anyways. Hope this video helps you with beating Aventurine if you're still struggling, or better understand the fight if you've already done and dusted him. Next video will be covering the AoE menace that is bananas, but until then, have a great day.